It's great. I think we've got enough people here to get started, almost 100. So great, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being with us at our LPC meeting today. It's January 11th, 2021. This is the Legislative Policy Committee meeting for the Utah League of Cities and Towns. We're doing it remotely, obviously. And we appreciate all of you being here and working with us as we navigate how to do LPC this way. The first item that I need to ask for is a motion on our minutes from our previous meeting. Has anybody had an opportunity to review the minutes, would like to make a motion to approve them? Does anyone
and
have
you can just type the motion into the chat box.
Yes, to be clear, please. Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Witt and a second by Clint Morris. So we're going to ask everyone to please vote in the chat box. All in favor of approving the minutes from our last meeting, please indicate so in the chat box. And I'm just going to stand by until I'm told that we have reached the approval threshold, which I think we're getting close.
Yep, we have.
Great.
Yep, we're good.
Excellent, thank you. You know, one thing I miss besides being able to see your faces in person is being able to even see your faces through Zoom. I don't even get to see your faces that way, but I appreciate that you're here and look forward to when I can see you again. We're going to move on. We have some virtual session logistics and resources. We're just going to kind of go over how this works with the session starting next Tuesday. So Wayne, will you walk us through that, please?
Actually, Mayor, I'll start giving the overview, and then between multiple members of the Ledge team, we'll take a few minutes to help make sure everyone's on the same page about the craziness that awaits us in 2021. First of all, happy 2021. It is a different year. We at the League don't celebrate a happy new year until the day after the session, and we have 53 days until the session ends. This session will be unprecedented because of the fact it'll be a hybrid session with some in-person components and a lot of virtual components. So our key takeaways for this meeting is first, ensure the direct communication between your city and your legislators. Mayor Ramsey will emphasize this in a few minutes, but more than ever before, the League Army concept of all of us working together is paramount. The strength of the League is the membership, and this year matters more than ever before. Second, we'll talk through about how to stay in touch with the League and how you can engage in the session. So you can see there are several ways for you to stay in touch with us, but electronic communication will be the name of the game, both with us and with legislators because of the limited in-person access at the Capitol. And so we need political intel from you. We need fiscal analysis from you. We need your input. We will be doing as much as possible during these meetings to get your input. So it's not just us talking to you, but that we're gathering input from you. And then your communication with the legislators is vital. A few quick notes about today. We are debuting new voting software. So hopefully the chat box vote we just took on the minutes will be the last chat box vote. Carson Eilers on our staff has been working day and night to prepare our voting software that we will unveil in just a few minutes, and so that voting members of LPC can take votes. Thus, it is critical that you have an updated LPC roster on our website. You can see the current roster on the website, but we need to know who the 3 voting reps are from your city. Board members, League board members, are automatically LPC members in addition to the 3 from your city. So Mayor Niehaus, I know you're on the call. Moab City has 3 plus Mayor Niehaus, who is 4. Okay, that's how the LPC voting delegation works. So today we'll be cross-checking based on once you register for the voting software in a moment, we'll be cross-checking that internally. Starting in the session, we'll actually be able to verify it right up front. So now is the time to make sure that you have selected your 3 voting members for LPC, and you do need to have at least 1 elected official as part of your LPC delegation because we're supposed to keep the LPC roster per our bylaws at 50% plus one of elected officials. Okay, we'll have a couple of poll questions in today's meeting. Oh, the first link is broken, so we'll have one of the people on our team monitoring the chat box to make sure that we fix the link. We do have staff permanently following the chat box. So as we're presenting bills, feel free to chime in. Even if you don't have a motion per se, but you just want a certain perspective heard about a bill, type it in there. Not only will we try to respond live, but we'll download all of the chat box responses, and that'll be very helpful for us. We will need you to make motions in the chat box, even though we'll be relying on the voting software for the actual votes. Okay, so the key takeaway number 2 is how to stay in touch and how to communicate with each other. The new LPC roster link is in the chat box. Number 3 is we are ringing the alarm. There are some bills that are very concerning because they disrespect the role of local government, but there are also some bills that have some tremendous potential in this upcoming session to highlight the partnership between state leaders and local government. Okay, those are the takeaways for today. Carson, next slide, please. Because of the hybrid nature of the legislative session, we will not have the image of a strapping Mayor Caldwell looking out over a room full of LPC members at the Capitol. That is impossible this year. We also don't want the legislature to feel like they're in a cocoon. We don't necessarily want conflict, but in order to have collaboration, it's going to be important that you have that open communication with your legislator. In years past, you could come to the Capitol, we'd feed you. Often many of you would go meet with your legislators, have that face-to-face interaction. That will be impossible this year. So it's vital that you have that regular electronic communication with them. Since October, we've been asking you, contact your legislator, ask them how they want to be contacted during the session so that you can contact them immediately. When we send action alerts and when we send a daily email, we will be providing you with the information that then you can relay to legislators immediately. Okay, next slide. If nothing else, of all of the bills and all of the issues and everything else we have coming this session, if you remember nothing else from this PowerPoint presentation beyond the butterflies in the cocoon, it's the pillars of respect, collaboration, and outcomes. RESPCT, that's the message that I should have come up with some sort of witty thing. RESPCT, that's what matters to cities. Not bad. Point is, as you talk to legislators, we want to respect the role of the state, and we want the state to respect our role as local governments, collaborate toward the outcomes of ensuring quality of life for our residents. And you can't spell, well, never mind, I'll stop. I was gonna say you can't spell city without CT from respect, but now I'm just going overboard. Mayor Ramsey, can I put you on the spot for a moment and have you relay the conversation that you, Victoria, the officers, and I had with Speaker Wilson earlier today?
Absolutely. But first, I'd like to make a motion that Caldwell sings RESPECT at our next conference. And nobody can really, speak out loud to oppose it. So I think it's happening. I think I'll let them know. Oh, see, there's a second.
You do have a second.
Thank you. No, Mike, too late. Yeah, there's lots of seconds. Yeah, we'll chat. I'll make sure that happens. No, we had the opportunity to visit with the speaker this morning. We appreciated his time, and we're meeting with the Senate President Adams coming up soon. But one thing that he really wanted to make sure that we understand is that our individual relationships with our legislators are going to be key. Security will be unique. The entire circumstance will be unique. And he just asked that we really get to know our legislators, make sure we have open communication with them, make sure they know that we look forward to reaching out to them and that they can reach out to us. We've tried to emphasize that we want to be collaborative. We want to work together. There are so many bills that affect local government in a way that we're slightly concerned about or really concerned about, that making sure that our desire to collaborate for best outcomes is understood is going to go even further if we have the opportunity to work closely with our individual legislators. So he really pointed that out and appreciates that opportunity. There are some things that are important to him and to the legislature that we'll be working on, but it's going to be quite a session. I think that's very clear. It's going to be quite a session. We're in for quite a ride, and So thank you to all of you for being willing to serve. But it was a good meeting with Speaker Wilson, and we look forward to visiting with President Adams. But please, please reach out to your local legislators and make sure that relationship is solid so that you can communicate with them and work together with them.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. So let's talk logistics. Carson and Wayne, I'll turn it over to the two of you to talk about what the logistics look like as you try to engage with the legislative process, as well as how you'll be able to engage and vote in this meeting and otherwise. So Wayne and Carson and Victoria, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Cam. First, we want to go over a few of the logistics for participating during the legislative session and the committee process. If you plan on attending in person, committee size rooms have been restricted to about 20% of capacity. So they are allowing people to go out and testify in person, but that will be very limited. So you'll want to plan ahead, go early. We hear that there will potentially be security checks and health checks. So security going through your bag and potentially a temperature check as you go into the buildings. They're also restricting the number of doors that are open. So you'll want to check the state's website, so le.utah.gov, to check, number one, what committee room they're going to be in, because they are changing locations. For example, the cafeteria has been turned into 2 committee rooms. So you want to check location as well as potential entrances. If you plan on participating remotely, you'll want to go to the committee website. As you can see on the top bar, you'll want to go to the committee, select the committee you're looking for, and then there will be a link in which you can participate remotely if you want to make comment or participate remotely through that link. Again, it's on the committee website and not on the calendar. So if you just go in and there's just the listen option, but if you want to comment, you need to go through the committee link. My recommendation is if you want to comment on something on the agenda, when the chair moves to that agenda item, raise your hand. That will put you in line, and as we go through the process, they may start limiting public comment because of time. And so you want to raise your hand early when you get to your agenda item. There are more instructions. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us as staff, but there are more instructions as you go to the main website. There's at the top of the page, they have all those instructions highlighted as well. Carson, can you go to the next slide? So we will be doing our daily briefing call virtually. The space that we use traditionally, they're not allowing invited guests. So all of our daily briefing calls will be virtual. They will be Tuesday through Friday. And right now we're planning at 10:15. If committee schedules change or something changes, we'll adjust that time. But right now we're planning on 10:15. The Zoom link will be the same for every day. And we will be distributing that to the previous attendees. But if you would like to participate in our daily briefing call, you need to email Carson before the end of the week so he can add you to that list and send you the Zoom link. That Zoom link will be password protected, and we will have a waiting room. For us to pull you out of the waiting room, we need you to list your full name and the city you're with, and then we'll pull you out of the waiting room into the general Zoom call. If you are participating by phone, you'll want to text Carson or myself your name and your city so we can identify that phone number in the waiting room and pull you into the Zoom call. And our cell phone numbers will be in that distribution email with the Zoom link. So again, if you would like to participate in our daily briefing call, you need to email Carson and we'll send you that information. Next slide. I'll tag team this with Victoria, but we want to talk a little bit about LPC member coordination. So when we've been doing some of the polling, we've been finding that there have been potentially opposing information coming from the same city. And so our hope is that you as LPC members will coordinate with the other members within New York City on potential votes. And we realize that these votes are live and that motions will be taken, as we're going through the meeting. And so if you want to set something up internally where you can review the LPC agenda together, potentially set up a text group or email group, or have your LPC members in the similar conference room so you can talk about the votes that you're about to take so we can get feedback specifically from your city. So I'll just turn it over to Victoria as well to go over some of this information.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Wayne mentioned. Unlike when you come to LPC at the Capitol and you can sit by each other and have sidebar conversations, that's going to be a lot different on virtual LPC. So we want you to be ready in advance if you feel like you need to vote in a block or have discussion amongst yourselves as LPC members so that you're prepared when we take these virtual votes. We'd strongly encourage you again to look at your roster, see who's signed up as a confirmed LPC member ahead of time. And as a reminder, when we ask for, when we take a motion and ask for a vote, that we will not have consensus unless 60% of the attendees reach that consensus. And we will be doing one of those votes at the end of the meeting today to affirm our recommendations on positions on the bills. And you can see the different positions there: support, opposed, neutral. We're trying to get direction from our LPC members, but we want to make sure that before we actually get to the vote, if you need to talk about things amongst yourselves as LPC members representing the city, that you're prepared for those votes in kind of this virtual world we are in. And if you have questions about any of this, please contact me, Wayne, or Carson, and we'd be happy to help you out.
And just to wrap up this slide, we do want to ask if there are any cities or towns that are proactively working with their legislator on legislation, and you have not let us know previously, please feel free to reach out to Victoria, Carson, or myself, what that legislation is and what legislator you're working with, so we can be aware of it and watch as it comes down. So. Pass it off to Carson.
Thanks, Wayne. I just had to find my unmute button there. So we're excited to announce that we're going to be deploying a new LPC voting software. We've been trying to explore how to do remote voting for a number of years, but we're trying to figure out how to make it secure, how to make it, how to actually make it productive within the LPC meeting. And so we've come to, we're going to start using this software called vVoter. We're going to try this out today, and this is the first time we've used it live, so we appreciate your patience as we try to deploy it. How this will work is going forward, and again, Cameron mentioned that it's important that everybody checks their LPC roster, because going forward after today, all LPC delegates will receive some login credentials that they will need to use in order to cast a vote. So please make sure those are up to date. Today, you will just be clicking on this link here, and I will drop it in the chat box so it is easy to find. You'll be clicking this link, and it'll bring you to a web page where you should see, right now you'll just see one of the PowerPoint slides that we're currently on. Once we get to a voting slide, then it'll prompt you to take a vote. You can use this same link on either the same device or on a cell phone or a tablet, whatever is most convenient for you. But again, please, LPC voting members, you can go ahead and click this, and we'll first have you put your name and city in, and then we will take a test poll to try to figure it out. So I'll give everybody, all LPC members, voting members, a chance to click on that and try it. Again, it's in the chat box, so you can click on it on your computer or tablet. And I want to also mention that this will be for official positions, so only LPC members will be able to use this. We'll be using Zoom polling for casual and informal information, so just trying to better understand your policy concerns or questions. We'll be doing 2 Zoom polls today. Any LPC attendee is welcome to participate in those Zoom polls. All right, so while everybody's had a chance to click on that, then I will open up this first form here. I'm seeing that it's not working. Is anybody else in the chat box having difficulties? It's working on my other device. So you should all, when opening that, okay, it looks like it's working for most people. If you have additional concerns, if you want to just send me a message on the Zoom chat box, I can try to troubleshoot it a little bit for you. Gary Hill said that if you refresh your screen, it's working. Nothing like a little speed bump to get us started with. So as you pull this up, please just go ahead and input your name and your city. And we'll give everybody a minute to do that. I wish we had some elevator music to play while we wait for that.
We could have called.
Who needs elevator music when you have RESPCT?
Okay, so I'm guessing everybody's had a moment to do that now. I will go ahead and close this first poll so you can kind of see it. As you can see, we have 67 responses. And once you submit it, it will say you submitted, so you can know that you it recorded your vote successfully. Oh, it looks like we still have a few more people. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move us along. It'll take a moment. So this will show that the polling is closed, and it'll reopen when we have another poll, but it will display it'll continue to display PowerPoint slides. So as you can see, we've recorded some information here, and we will, that information's all been recorded and logged, so it'll verify another polls. Now, I wanted to do just a quick fun test vote just for to see how multiple choice voting will work. When we're actually taking a position on a bill, we'll have the options for, we'll be taking positions on motions like we would normally. And so you'll have the options of support, oppose, and abstain. For now, we'll be making motions through the Zoom chat box. There is a feature in this tool that we haven't really explored yet, but it'll allow us to make motions eventually through that platform. So look forward to continued interactivity through that voting system. I'm surprised there's not a flood of excitement here. All right, since this is just kind of a fun test vote, I'm going to go ahead and just move it along. So don't worry if your answer hasn't been responded on this, because this will be it's not formal policy, but just kind of for fun. So I'm closing that software, I'm closing that poll. And I'll give us a moment to load. And then we see the results. Shockingly, only 30% of you wish that the session was longer. So in summary, that's sort of how the software will work. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be sending more information to each of you in the coming days, letting you know what your credentials will be to log in. And we'll provide more information on how this works and try to streamline it for you if you're having any problems. So with that said, we'll turn it over to the legislative outlook. We'll be taking official stances. We'll be taking motions for official stances on policy at the end of the meeting. So please keep that tab open or reopen it if you already closed it. And you'll be able to use that software to vote on the official votes towards the end here. And with that, I will turn it back to Cam and Victoria.
Okay, thank you, Carson. And again, we'll put that link in for the end when we do voting. This is just a reminder of our prisms. Cam's already gone through our pillars and respect outcomes and collaboration, and reminder that as we now have bills before us, these are the questions that we ask ourselves as we go through each bill. Some of them meet the test and others don't, or we need a little more information on. Carson, if you go to the next slide. And then we've been showing these at each of the meetings. This is our policy tiers where we're kind of keeping track of the bills as they come on board, and then going to our board to give us direction as to how to prioritize staff time and capital that we have when we have to deal with some of these bills. And so I won't spend a lot of time on these. Since our last meeting, we added this red P to indicate preemption, and we'll be talking about some of those bills today. We will try and keep these tiers updated as we go through session and as our position or investment changes on each of them. Carson, if you'd go to the next slide. Okay, I'll turn over to Cam to talk about some tier 1 issues we're seeing.
Perfect, thank you, and well done, Carson. I think I speak for all of the ledge team that's older than you that we were cheering for you to make sure that everything went well on the test run there. So thank you for your tremendous work behind the scenes over the last few weeks and in preparation for the session. Within tier 1 is public safety. Also within tier 1 is housing and transportation and planning for population growth. So we'll give you an update on some bills and concepts here today. First and foremost in the public safety world is that the loss for local government is the gain for the state of Utah. Bountiful Police Chief Tom Ross, after 34 years, is leaving Bountiful City because Governor Cox extended the offer to be the executive director of the Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice. This will be a tremendous opportunity, not just for Chief Ross. I think he will be perfect for this role, but a tremendous opportunity to better align what the state is trying to accomplish with a local government perspective. So we will miss Chief Ross within our local ranks, but again, I think our short-term loss is the long-term gain for the state of Utah. Chief Ross has been the co-chair along with immediate past President Mike Mendenhall of Spanish Park of our Loveless and Lee Task Force. Our last couple of meetings have really focused on SB 13. I've brought this bill up the last 2 LPCs. I was hoping we'd be ready with a recommendation. And here's where we're at. Last week, the Loveless and Lee Task Force endorsed a potential sub to SB 13 that would improve the notice to post about potential allegations of misconduct that are within post authority, improve the communication between agencies when an officer is leaving one agency and looking to be employed by another agency, and ensure candid communication within the scope of employment between those agencies. Our task force endorsed this potential substitute. I have since worked on some language and shared it with key stakeholders, and we're waiting for final feedback from Senator Iwamoto. So our recommendation for the LPC is to wait until that sub-language is ready. Our task force has endorsed it, so we're proceeding with that. We'll bring it back to the LPC. Hopefully that first LPC of the session, everything will be ready to go, I's dotted, T's crossed on these pieces. Likewise, the task force last week endorsed criteria for how to consider bills and potentially support bills around data collection. Carson, can you go to the next slide? Interestingly enough, over the weekend, there was an article in the Salt Lake Tribune headlined this way: the Utah Attorney General's office, quote, surprised, unquote, the police shot at so many people in 2020. And the crux of the article was about some of the gaps in data collection. This is where I think having Chief Ross as head of CCJJ will be really helpful, because Chief Ross and I have attended countless meetings this year on the topics of data collection. And you can see some of the questions that our task force raised last week, such as what are the definitions? What is the purpose of the data being collected? Who's using it? What privacy guidelines are in place for officers? What's the process for collecting the data? Every city has different technical capabilities. So the task force adopted this criteria so that as we discuss with the state potential changes to data collection, we can run it through this lens to make sure it's checking these boxes so that any bill that changes the data collection will be something that's usable and workable and has the support of all stakeholders. So there are multiple bills right now that are protected around data collection. Which ones will come to the top is still anybody's guess. In our meeting with Speaker Wilson today, we asked him for his input about where bills would go on public safety. He indicated that he and his leadership team were supportive of law enforcement. and that they were looking forward to having a good, robust discussion at the committee level and felt really good about their committee assignments. In fact, the new chair of the House Law Enforcement Committee is Representative Ryan Wilcox, who previously served in the legislature and has a strong relationship with public safety officials. So yes, there will be plenty of bills ranging from data collection to training to the communication bill that I referenced with SB 13 to the duties and council membership for post and location within state government. Our objective over the course of the session is to take all of the concepts that fit within our task force, bring them back to the task force, which will meet several times during the session, get the feedback of the task force, endorsements or opposition from the task force, then bring it back to the LPC and to the other stakeholders. I'm checking the chat box to see if there are any questions about where things are at in the law enforcement world. So I will wait a moment, but I don't see anything. As of, let's see, what day is today, Monday? So as of Friday, there were 79 bill files open in this space, of which only single digits had public language yet. And we've been trying to follow up with sponsors, but there's a lot out there, so stay tuned. And thank you to those cities that are participating in our task force. We have over 20 cities who have contributed city managers, elected officials, and police chiefs to that task force, and attorneys to that task force. Okay, Carson, let's move on to the next one. Another tier 1 issue that is not yet ready for a vote from the LPC, but wanted to make sure it was on your radar screen, is in the areas of economic development and infrastructure. We know that there will be a bill to create an economic development commission. That commission will take many of the duties that GOED was previously responsible for and incorporate the legislative branch more fully into the decision-making process. Likewise, we have requested, and we've been told to expect local government representation on the commission. So we specifically requested that ULCT would be able to nominate someone on this commission. Still haven't seen the final bill language, but we've been told that request will be granted. Likewise, in the world of transportation infrastructure, buckle up. There is going to be a lot of activity in this space. What's fascinating about this right now is that Utah is actually one of the strongest COVID-19 economies. So we've seen some really devastating public health numbers in Utah, and certain areas of the state have been frankly devastated at different times this year because of COVID-19. But in the aggregate, at the state level, the state's budget has weathered the storm well, and many local governments have weathered the storm well, particularly compared to other states. That means there's a window of opportunity for a potential bond, a sizable amount that could include for the first time transit projects and active transportation, potentially also some specific dollars for a municipal infrastructure bank. There's discussion right now about active state participation in transit-oriented developments if project areas meet certain criteria. These are still preliminary discussions, and it's unfortunate that we're still having preliminary discussions in January rather than August, but much of that is due to COVID and the election. And so I think there'll be a lot of big ticket policy discussions in this space over the next couple of months. Likewise, there's a discussion around a system-wide TRZ around UTA and what that could look like. So again, most of these proposals are just that, proposals at this point. Bill, I see, yes, we're going to talk the governor's budget. So this is perfect segue, Bill. It's like my fellow Utah fan here was reading my mind. The governor's budget did come out today. He announced it at SUU. We've been waiting for it for a few days. It was supposed to come out last week, but the civil unrest in DC and at the Capitol postponed it until today. Yes, Bill, the answer is yes. The governor is supportive of expanding FrontRunner. By expanding it, we're talking about doubling the FrontRunner lanes. And yeah, Wayne has poured through the budget document today, and at the end of the meeting plans to go into a little more detail, but there's a tremendous emphasis within the governor's budget around planning for growth, both on the Wasatch Front and off the Wasatch Front, everything from investment in broadband infrastructure to encouraging cities to look at zoning practices. So Wayne will go into more detail at the end, and we will send out the link to the budget document that was released today. In fact, Wayne, if you don't mind just putting the link to that whole document in the chat box. The league board submitted priorities to both the transition team and the governor's office of planning or management and budget in anticipation of the budget review. And Bill, one of our requests was to double track front runner. That was on our list of priorities. This is a perfect segue on the economic development front to rural Utah, because the Main Street program was a pilot program that the league has previously supported that now will have legislation to make it permanent. I believe the two pilot cities were Brigham City and Price City. Paul Larson, I saw your name in the registration materials, so if I'm wrong, I'm sure, let me know, but I'm confident it was Brigham City and Price were the two pilots, both of which have been successful. Boom, nailed it. Thank you, Paul. And so this will be part of this overall agenda of how do you ensure economic development is achieved across the state, and what's the role of state government on infrastructure, what's the role of local government in that infrastructure planning. So there'll be a lot of buzz around this. Stay tuned as proposals get language on them. If your city is specifically interested in these conversations, again, post in the chat room so we know to follow up with you. And this will be a major point of emphasis for us in the session. Any other thoughts on law enforcement, economic development, or transportation within Tier 1? Oh, Andrew Gruber is pointing out that Governor Cox's proposed budget does not recommend new bonding. That is true. There is discussion on the third floor of the Capitol about a new bonding proposal. And so we expect that to be part of the debate over the next few weeks, is to bond or not to bond. And if you bond, what does that mean for projects that are currently on the list? And then would that bond be open up to active transportation projects and transit? Let's see. Council member Randy from Moab asks about HB 60 and 61. Usually it doesn't happen to me that somebody asks me a bill number and I don't know what it is. And so give me a second to pull those up. But I don't think we have 60 or 61 on the agenda, do we, Victoria?
No, we don't.
Okay, so then we don't yet have a staff recommendation on 60 or 61, but I will quickly look those up as we continue on the agenda. So Victoria, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Cam. The next area that we wanted to cover is the housing bills. And again, these two bills are Tier 1 bills for us as well. And you can see in the chat box some more information on those two bills that came up. So you can take a look at those, but we do not have a position yet on those bills. Carson, if you go to the next slide, we just want to emphasize how much interest there is at the legislature on housing this year. The speaker brought it up again in our conversation this morning. It was really the first thing that he mentioned to us in our discussion. And he mentioned that there are housing bills he knows about and a lot of housing bills he doesn't know. So we should be prepared to see a lot of interest and creative ideas on this front. His caucus has identified housing as one of the top 3 priorities for this session. And just to give you an idea of what we are hearing from legislators and also those in the building community, whether it's fair or not, we're hearing that the delayed inspections and reviews by some cities are driving up housing costs, and so this is an affordable housing issue, that the municipal building fees are driving up costs, and the service gained from those fees does not match the cost of the fee, that some municipalities are interpreting the deadlines differently, delayed reviews for minor corrections, and the cities are not efficiently staffed to move things through fast enough for the deadlines. And that there are some cities, again, we're not getting names, but that if their time for inspections or reviews are challenged, that those cities take retribution on the applicants. Leadership is also interested in ADUs. So we're going to talk about Representative Ward's bill, but we need everyone to understand that we have heard rumors that the leadership may run their own ADU bill, and mandate ADUs throughout the state. And finally, that some cities are not doing their part to plan for affordable housing and to keep on top of deadlines and inspections. And so we really need to help with this narrative at the Capitol, but an understanding of what we are running into as we prepare to work on some of these bills with sponsors. Carson, if you would go to the next slide. So, and I want to remind everyone that even though we have recommendations for these various bills, we will continue to work with sponsors. So we may take positions today, but session hasn't started yet, and we want to continue to talk to these sponsors and see what we can do to change their bills. And so let me talk first about Representative Ward's bill. We've talked a lot about this bill. He came to LPC last time. We now have the numbered bill with the actual language in front of us. Just as a reminder, this is on the internal ADUs. It says that if a city allows ADUs, then it is a permitted use, and that a municipality may not establish restrictions or requirements on those internal ADUs, including the size of the ADU in relation to the primary dwelling, total lot size, parking, or street frontage. This bill also amends the definition in LUDMA on single family limits and takes out the word unrelated. So in LUDMA, it directs when a city can limit the number of people in a single family unit. Those two floors or minimums are different for university cities and everyone else. So if you want to take a look at that language, you can pull up 109A505.5. This bill also does some things that we are not as concerned about and are actually probably great steps in affordable housing. It modifies the building code so that an internal ADU is not treated like a duplex. And it's our understanding that Representative Ward has worked a lot with building code officials, and we have not heard any further concerns about that. It also prohibits HOAs from prohibiting certain ADUs and creates a program to create loan guarantees for those individuals who want to modify their homes and create these internal ADUs. Our staff recommendation right now on this bill is opposed because of the concerns over the restrictions and potentially the single family limits. But we've asked some questions about this bill in the past, and we want to put up one more polling question on this bill right now as a final gut check for us as we continue to talk to Representative Ward about his bill. So Carson, if you would put that poll up, that would be great. Again, this is not the vote. We'll do that at the end. This is just a question about this bill and the components in it. So if you would take a look at that and decide which part of this bill is most offensive or most opposed to, and submit that in the box.
And Victoria, while people are taking that poll, there was a question from Paul Larson about, on your previous slide when you were giving an update on kind of what the legislature is inferring. He wants to know, did they name names or just throw out allegations?
We have not really been given names. So again, all of this taken with a giant grain of salt. But we have not received any specific names. All right, Carson, if you would show those results, that would be great. Okay, so it looks like top of the list is the concern about off-street parking. We have talked about this quite a bit with Representative Ward. He just feels differently about it, but we will keep talking with him, recognizing that there are concerns about some of these other areas as well, like the permitted use process and the unrelated persons. So thank you for giving us that information as we continue to talk with him. Carson, if you go on to the next. The next bill we've talked a lot about in the context of HB 375 from last year. This was a bill that we worked on with Representative Ray, and over the summer we collected information from all of you about the time it took you to complete plan reviews and inspections. Unfortunately, although we have been discussing this with the Home Builders Association, Representative Ray has not really engaged with us on this. And to no surprise, really, he has now introduced a bill that looks a lot like the bill last year, but in some ways is even more problematic. It allows all applicants to opt out of inspections and engage their own licensed building inspector. Although the applicant has to provide the name of their inspector to the city, that building inspector hired by the applicant, which may be the builder themselves, may issue the certificate of occupancy. It also allows an applicant to opt out of plan review and engage the licensed building inspector to do plan review. The municipality can do a zoning review, but it may not charge more than $200 for that. The bill also prohibits the municipality from adopting building design elements. These include exterior materials, roof structure, location design of windows or doors, interior layout, or minimum square footage, landscaping, and minimum dimensions. So we've continued to talk to the Home Builders Association about this. However, the message they've delivered to us is that Representative Ray is not really interested in budging much on this bill, that he sees this as an affordable housing issue, and that he's finding cities are inconsistent and not complying with the law. So I see a question here. Does this apply to residential development only or commercial as well? It applies to both as it's drafted right now. Our recommendation for this bill is an oppose. Again, we are continuing to talk to the parties about it, but right now we are recommending an oppose because of the concerning preemption that exists in this bill. All right, Carson, if you would go on to the next. All right, let's continue with some of the other bills we've seen popped up in the last week or so. And I'm going to turn this over to Cam to talk about voter referendum.
Perfect. Thank you, Victoria. And thanks everyone for your feedback on the ADU bill, and keep the feedback coming both in the chat and otherwise. House Bill 23 is a voter referendum bill that actually appeared during the interim, was on a call for a special session. Then the night before the special session, the property owner withdrew and there was no need for a bill. That being said, Representative Nelson, who represents the Tooele area, wants to proceed with what we negotiated during the summer. Really two primary pieces. One, that a rezone is part of a land, is considered a land use law within the definition in the election code. And second, and this is really the biggie, that if you file for a referendum after the statutory deadline of April 15th, that there is a process where the parties can agree on to shorten timeframes, mutually agree to shorten timeframes in order to make the November ballot. This was something that we wanted as part of the local direct democracy modernization effort 2 years ago. We just couldn't get it across the finish line. So now we have the opportunity to get across the finish line. So our board endorsed the concept as we were negotiating it leading into that special session. So as a result, our staff recommendation is support, and it's consistent with what we worked on 2 years ago in House Bill 119. And we had a task, for those who don't know, we had a task force that worked for 2 years on the recommendations to improve local referendum and initiatives. Councilmember Ellsworth asked if this is the only bill on referendums this session. Oh, dear me, no. This is the one that has the biggest policy shift. Representative Thurston has one that we've been working on as well with the Municipal Clerks Association. That's really more of a technical fix bill. There are a few pieces of that bill that we're just waiting on feedback from him of what he wants to do. And then inevitably, there are always double-digit number of referendum and initiative bills, but this is the one that is ready for prime time.
Carson, if you go to the next slide, I think we'll turn over to Roger to talk about Metro Townships.
Several years ago, when Salt Lake County went through the process of creating Metro Townships, and I want to emphasize to everybody, Metro Townships are not the same as, for lack of a better term, regular townships that exist outside. They're only in Salt Lake County. There are 5 or 6 of them. At that time, they were created really as part of they're part of the municipality category. In other words, they're listed within that same structure. But because they were involved with counties, county governments providing services, the legislation at that time specifically took away the authority to impose the municipal energy tax and the telco tax. So it was not a case of that they would have been granted it with their classification as being a municipality of sorts, but it specifically took that away. Well, since then, essentially the relationship with the Metro Townships in Salt Lake County, they've severed their relationships really operationally with the counties. And what they're proposing is to say, to be treated like the other categories of municipalities that have the authority to impose those 2 taxes. So that's the proposal. It's to remove the restriction that is currently there. After several discussions with the board and others, the board voted to support granting that authority to the Metro Townships, and our staff recommendation is to do that. But I think it's important to emphasize it's not giving them new authorities, we're taking away the restriction that was imposed when they were first created, and because of the circumstances surrounding them have changed.
All right, thanks, Roger. Next, we're going to talk about HB 96. We've mentioned this bill last month. This is Representative Harrison. This bill would require political subdivisions to designate an emergency manager and create an emergency operations plan. It also requires counties to have a plan to conduct emergency mass notifications under a FEMA program. And our staff recommendation on this bill is neutral. All right, Carson, if you go on to the next. HB 107, Subdivision Plat Amendments. This bill requires an individual who's recording a subdivision plat to specify and easements and rights of way for water conveyance facilities. And those are ditches, canal companies, flume pipeline, or other water courses used to bring water in. It also specifies water conveyance facilities within 100 feet of plat that is not recorded. So if you are applying for the subdivision plat, you need to put that on there. And provide written notice of the proposed subdivision to an owner of a water conveyance facility. It also requires for a municipality to mail written notice of a proposed subdivision to any water conveyance facility owner located entirely or within 100 feet of the plat, and consider input received from the owner when reviewing the subdivision plat. And finally, it requires a surveyor to make a subdivision plat to verify certain water conveyance facility information. And I say, question, does this mean canals and ditches? And yes, it does. We're still getting some feedback on this bill. We've heard some concerns about it, and also some feeling that this bill is probably okay. So at this point, we have no recommendation yet. We're going to do some further vetting. But if you have any thoughts on this, please feel free to contact me. Carson, if you go on to the next slide. All right, SB 65. So I'm going to turn this over to Roger. We've had this bill up before at LPC a couple of times, and I'll just let Roger walk through the reminder of what it does.
I've gone over this bill in my mind several times. Bear in mind, I'm not I'll still use the term RDA. I realize that's not the appropriate term, and I realize there are people on the call who are, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the essence of this particular bill, which is now numbered, it's Senate Bill 65, is in effect, it creates the option of a community reinvestment agency to enter into interlocal agreements with the taxing entities that are part of that entity, which would be either cities, counties, or school districts, to in effect, they keep the taxing part or all of the tax increment money coming back and keep it with the agency, and that the agency would now have the authority to levy a property tax subject to the restrictions of truth in taxation. So that in effect, it has an ongoing revenue stream associated with the agency. I think there's a question, could they do this anyway? Or do you need legislation? And the second, is it a good thing to do? Because cities have planned on using the money and using property tax authority in this fashion. Is that good policy? But that's really the essence of the proposal. Is that it grants an option? It's not a mandate, but you do have the question here is that this creates a newfound authority for community investment to levy a property tax and to keep that money rather than going back to the entities that are part of it. So that's a long story to distill it down to. And we realized we had cities that strongly opposed it, and some that really think it's a great idea.
So Roger, in the comments, I see a question about repealing SB 6001, and I am not familiar with that bill.
I'm not either.
Paul, is that the bill that extends the dates for RDA? Good.
I couldn't tell you.
Back on my game after Randy threw me for a loop with the earlier one.
That was the one done for COVID extension I had. I could not answer that. So
Roger, there's another question saying this would seem to make less money available for community-specific project areas.
I supposition if you're taking money from a certain other sources and you're putting it into a designated source. Again, it's an option, not a mandate.
So there's another question. Does the agencies recognize new growth before the new levy?
I'd assume they would, but the details of the actual imposition of the certified tax rate are supposed to be the same as they are for any other tax
levy. So there's a few questions about, is this optional or is it a mandate?
It is an option, it is not a mandate. It's a new tool.
Karsten, have you been able to find Councilmember Johnston?
So
call?
I haven't, and I guess if people wish to raise their hands to speak on bills, then they can go ahead and do that. We'll try to keep it fairly limited, but if you'd like to raise your hand to speak on this bill, then I will promote you to speak.
And keep in mind that the staff recommendation right now is no position, because we know we have cities who are in opposition and some that are supportive. And if we don't have a 60% consensus within the organization, then we do not take a position on the bill. So Carson, did you have someone raise their hand or not? I see more comments. If we don't have anybody raising their hand, we can read these comments. If we have somebody raising their hand, then we can call on them to speak.
This is Andrew Johnson when you're ready.
Oh, great. You got it, Andrew.
This is Paul Larson. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear each of you. So if you just want to take turns and just make your statement, then go ahead.
I was just going to mention I've worked with the Utah Redevelopment Association, been somewhat familiar with this. It is, as I understand, discretionary. Each agency would make the determination whether to pursue this. I think, like Roger says, it would be a new tool in our quiver. And since it's not mandatory, it would hopefully be something that would be palatable to the rest of the league.
Yeah, this is Andrew Johnston from Salt Lake City, and I do understand it's optional. From a personal perspective, living in an area that represents a very low income area, my concern is a couple of things. One, it's that I understand the struggle in working with other entities to get tax increment and trying to do this without having to work with school districts per se or the county. It also means there's probably less money for smaller projects. And when I think about my project area in my neighborhood, it's not regionally significant, most likely. The money you could generate alone is going to be a problem in trying to do much. And I'm worried that this would give the option of saying I can avoid working with the other entities. It drops the amount of money for a local project, unless you can get a regional project, which the county will join on to. The second concern I've got is really affordable housing. In existing areas, you have to set aside a percentage for that. And we know we have a huge issue with that. And as it's currently being considered, I believe this bill doesn't have that in there. And if this becomes more and more palatable for folks to use, does it also mean there's less and less affordable housing money coming out of this? Because it becomes a real strong economic development tool, but it doesn't attach housing or anything else to it. And I'm really concerned about that piece.
So Roger, we have one other question. So the property tax imposed is on the properties within a given project area boundary. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, you're entering into an interlocal. So it essentially the property that's within the agreed property of the interlocals who agree to the agreement will be the property to be subject to the new tax.
So I don't see any more hands or questions in the chat box on this one.
And just as a caution, I'm answering questions. Again, we have no position on it. There are pro and con arguments on this all around. It's your call on this.
Yeah, to clarify what Carson just put in the chat room, or to not clarify, but emphasize it, our staff recommendation is no position, knowing that we have heard from cities on both ends of the spectrum on this bill. When we get to the end, then there'll be a slide that'll list every bill we've reviewed with the staff recommendation. Then we can take the motion, and if someone wants to change, whether it's this or the recommendation on any other bill, you can do that, and we'll run it through the voting software.
Okay, thanks for this good debate and good questions. The next bill is HB 63 Impact Fees Amendment. This is actually a bill that the Land Use Task Force approached Representative Perucci for running. We see it really mostly as a technical clarification. It clarifies that a local entity may use impact fees to pay for the impact fee facilities plan and analysis and enactment of the impact fee. This is already in statute, but it's kind of written as a double negative. And so this is just to clarify that authority, and our staff recommendation is a support. Carson, if you'd go to the next. HB 28 Land Use and Eminent Domain Advisory Board Amendments. This was before the Political Subdivisions Committee. This is a pretty simple bill. It repeals the sunset date on the Land Use and Eminent Domain Advisory Board. There was a consensus that that board is useful and should not be sunsetted, and so this would repeal the sunset, and our staff recommendation is to support that bill. Okay, next is the best part of the presentation, which is the preemption bills, because the legislature feels like they know all, see all, are omniscient and omnipresent in all your cities and know what needs to be done or not done. So they've got some big ideas. The first bill is HB 76 on firearm, and I'll turn that over to Cam.
Thanks. You give me that intro, and then you hand the platter over to me. If this bill looks familiar, it should, because House Bill 76 made it through the House last year over our opposition. We successfully improved the bill in committee, but we still opposed it on the House floor, and then the Senate did not take it up. But Representative Malloy is back this year. A couple of just points of clarification with this bill. There already exists a preemption on local governments regulating firearms unless you fit into some of the safe harbors. So the legislature occupies the whole field, but they have created these carve-outs. So one of the concerns that we have pointed out over the last 12 months now with this bill is that if you restate the preemption, you could inadvertently close some of those safe harbors and areas where cities have historically regulated in a manner that is consistent with the existing state preemption. The bill would thus void any local ordinance or policy that violates it. And one thing that's very concerning is that it would provide standing for anyone harmed by that action to sue and potentially collect damages, attorney's fees, and be able to access those dollars through a waiver of government immunity against local government. So we're very concerned about the chilling effect with this bill. So our recommendation, like it was last year, is to oppose. And again, it's not about firearms per se on this one, because there already exists a preemption on firearms. It's really more about the preemption plus and what some of these consequences would be in this new path for litigation that could waive government immunity. So with that being said, we do have a poll question on this one. So this is a fairly simple question, but just to make sure that our recommendation is in line. So the question is, if there's a city ordinance or contract that violates the state preemption of firearms, should the city be subject to damages or waiver of government immunity? So in other words, could the bill restate the provision but not create the liability or the waiver of government immunity and extend that liability on cities? So we'll give you a moment to vote. Somebody, I think, asked for the Jeopardy music a moment ago. Oh, Margaret, one of my favorite attorneys just asked, is this related to hunting on city property? Let's see. Let's see, okay. Is this related to hunting on city property and the ordinance is approved under Title 10? Yes, that was one of the major points we used last year during the session to say that if a city had it, right now under current law, a city can regulate the discharge of firearms. That does not violate the preemption, but that's up in the air under the newly stated preemption, whether cities could still regulate the discharge of firearms within city limits. So that would be one area that's a safe harbor now, where the safe harbor could be jeopardized going forward, and then you throw the damages on it too. Okay. I think we're ready to, oh, there it is, okay. Oh, that's rather overwhelming. In fact, I'm going to take a picture of this rather overwhelming vote because that'll be helpful in our conversations. So I'm sure there's a more technologically savvy way to do it, but there you go. That's helpful. So thank you for that feedback, and stay tuned. This is a bill that passed overwhelmingly out of the House last year and has some momentum this year because of the collection of firearm-related bills that are moving forward. Victoria?
Okay, thanks, Cam. Next, we're going to hand it over to Roger to talk about Representative Handy's utility bill, which we have brought up in the past LPC. The language is the same, but Roger, take it away.
This is a weird bill, to put it blunt. And Representative Handy is one of our own former city councilmen and has generally been very supportive of cities. Last week, Mike Squires from UAMPS and Mike, I know, is on the call, so I didn't say anything outrageous here. Send me a comment or text me. But we met with him to discuss it. It was a very cordial discussion. This really centers on a philosophical issue with Representative Handy. His view is that cities should not be able to prohibit a utility service that would be provided by a utility within a city or a county based upon the type of energy. So all about it is basically if a city wants to prohibit the use of natural gas in their community, and that's been they don't have they would not have the ability to do that. So that's the essence of it. A city or a county could not have a policy or an ordinance that prohibits a utility service based upon what the energy source behind that. Now, talking with Representative Handy, just a couple of things that came up. One, he has no problem with the issue of incentives. In other words, if the city wanted to say, hey, if you want to build an all-electric house and we'll lower your building fees or whatever, I don't think he'd have an objection to that. He was very clear. He said, I don't have a problem with incentives. I'm against prohibition. The second is raising the question, individuals, including the city itself, can build whatever type of facilities it wants in terms of energy. In other words, if the city wants to say we're going to use all solar energy and no natural gas for facilities owned by the city, he doesn't see it. That's fine. It's the individual owner could make that decision. But as a blanket policy, he's against a city being able to prohibit a utility service connection based upon the source of energy. The derivation of this, because it's kind of one of those situations, I don't know of any cities that want to do that. That doesn't mean there aren't some that consider it. I understand the clean air argument. But the concern is driven by the fact that there are a handful of cities around the country that have done that. And his issue is based upon that particular issue. I don't think it's a secret that the Dominion Energy is concerned about this. This is part of their issue of their development of their renewable natural gas plans that they're putting together. Their concern is they're rolling some of these out, and they are concerned about the cities prohibiting the use of natural gas in potential communities. But it's kind of one of those issues where it's currently a non-problem in Utah, and it's a solution to a non-problem. But it is a philosophical issue for Representative. That's how he feels about it. Now, one of the difficulties here is it's very difficult to negotiate on a bill that you're philosophically disagree with the premise. And Representative Handy did not disagree with that. And I think he's fully aware that we're likely to oppose this. And I know there was a lot of anxiety from the municipal electrical entities. It's not directed to you, but again, the issue comes down to that the energy source, a city should not be able to prohibit whatever utility connections are there. That there's another issue that I want to raise here. Utilities, responsibility for seeing that public utilities are provided is one of the few items that's constitutionally the prerogative of cities in the Utah Constitution. Now, you start looking for that. It's mentioned under the charter cities provision, but it's historically been applied to all cities. It's sort of our show. He mentioned that he'd heard something about counties, and I said that's not our problem. They don't have that authority. But it really is one of those unique issues that we take the view that we're responsible within our boundaries to see the utility services provided. This isn't historically a legislative role. The counter argument to that is broader energy policy can be a state role. So anyway, it's a rather clear bill. There's really not a lot of negotiation about the principle. It's really straight up whose responsibility is that. And it was a cordial discussion, Representative Handy. He's normally on with us on a lot of issues, but that's sort of the long and short of the discussion.
All right, thank you, Roger. Our last preemption bill, and it wouldn't be a post-COVID weird 2021 session without a billboard bill. And if you haven't been involved in the billboard fights, I experienced this from the legislative side when I was a drafter, and some of my favorite stories are from the billboard bills. That doesn't mean that they're good stories, they're just favorite stories. So Senator Sandel is supporting or sponsoring SB 61 outdoor advertising amendments. This bill does a few things. It prohibits a municipality from enforcing an ordinance that prevents a billboard from upgrading to an electronic or mechanical changeable sign. So in this case, you would not have the option to tell a billboard owner if they could or could not upgrade. you would have no choice, but you would have to upgrade if that owner wanted to do that. The city may not require an owner who converts their sign to forfeit another sign. So that would come out of code, that option to require forfeiture. Also has language about curfews. This allows the city to set a curfew only if the sign is located outside an area governed by the Highway Beautification Act or the Utah Federal Agreement, and the face of the sign is within 150 feet of the outer edge of an existing residential dwelling that is legally occupied and located on property zoned exclusively residential. So your ability to put a curfew on the bright, shiny sign is extremely limited to this specific circumstance. The bill also requires the municipality to pay attorney fees if an owner who wants to convert successfully enforces that right to upgrade to an electronic sign. It also amends the provisions related to brightness of electronic signs. It repeals minimum spacing criteria, so the space in between signs, for those signs located on non-limited access primary highways in commercial, industrial, or H1 zone areas. The illumination is changed, so the illumination of electronic changeable message signs may not be limited except to prevent increasing ambient light levels by more than 0.3 foot candles. And if you adopt an illumination standard for other signs than billboards, then the electronic changeable message sign has the option to choose the brighter of those two standards. So there is a lot in this bill. There's a good question about foot candles. I honestly have no idea. So it's an interesting reference, but yeah, you might want to talk to some of your engineers about that. And then each city is so different. From Mayor Burton, one decision does not fit all. And you're absolutely right. Carson, if you would go to the next slide. As you think about this bill, think about what billboards look like in your community. If you're a community, a large urban community next to the freeways, billboards look different than if you're a community with some older billboards. And does this apply to off-premise signs only? Oh, I wish I had double-checked that before we hopped on.
Yep, I'm double-checking.
Check that. Okay.
Yep, I'm double-checking.
Look at it for me. But you have to think about the billboards in your community, and they're not always the very tall ones that you see driving along I-15. And Cam's put some good pictures here together to illustrate that point. So our recommended position on this bill is to oppose. I was in a discussion the other day where one of the members of that discussion made a very good point, which is that we almost never, if ever, see billboard bills this early in session, which could be an ominous indication of how confident some sponsors and stakeholder groups feel about getting legislation through in this very bizarre, weird virtual session. And again, just a reminder that we're going to need all of your help to reach out to your legislators to try and work with this. I'll give Cam just a couple of seconds if he can find that. Let's see. Oh, go ahead, Cam.
Yep, the lighting standard language applies to both off and on-premise signs. Oh, good. I'm glad, Mayor Burton, that we've generated some business. I was hoping you were going to buy Utah football tickets because of the other slide. I had to work Utah sports into the presentation somehow. So I want to emphasize though what Victoria said about billboard legislation. There have been times in the past we've been able to get the yes on bills, but there have been other times where this has been a line in the sand over local authority that has dragged on to 7 minutes to midnight. What she was referencing when she was on the ledge staff side, I was on the league side, and Gary Crane and Lynn Pace and Sean Guzman and many city leaders have the scars to show where we were debating and lobbying this bill until 7 minutes to midnight on the final night of the session before we were ultimately able to succeed and defeat the bill. I have reached out to Senator Sandel. I have a good relationship with him. And I recommend those of you like Paul and others up north who are in his district also reach out to him about the bill. He's agreed to meet. He said he knows that it's controversial. He wants to get stakeholders together. So stay tuned. Paul, excellent question on all this local preemption. So this is a perfect place to point out that this overall trend of state interference and preemption in local government was a major point of emphasis in our outreach to now Governor Cox's transition team and to his senior staff. And we actually will have scheduled meetings with league officers and senior staff for the first time, starting the first week of the session to talk about these types of issues. So where does he stand on all the local preemption generally? I'd say to be determined, because we haven't asked him point blank, but we've raised all these issues in the documents we submitted to his team, and we'll be meeting with his team next week.
Thanks,
okay.
Cam, and thanks, Wayne, for finding foot candles definition. So I appreciate that. All right, Carson, if you go to the next slide. So we've put a lot of information in front of all of you. This is a summary slide of all the bills we've gone through today and our recommendation for ULCT's position on those bills. So Mayor Ramsey, as chair, I'll turn this over to you. It's my understanding some people may have questions about the motions, but we would be looking for a motion to affirm these recommendations or potentially amend some of these recommendations. So Chair Ramsey, I'll turn over to you.
Well, thank you for all of that. Did everybody get all that? Like you all know, that's a lot of information and a lot of moving parts. We appreciate your expertise and the whole team, all of the staff working so hard to keep it straight and advise us as all of this change day by day. And we haven't even started the session. At this point, I will ask if there's a motion to ratify the recommended positions. If there is a motion, then we'll take that and we'll have discussion. If somebody would like to, I mean, you can ask questions. You do
Hello, Mayor.
Yes.
This is Salt Lake City Council Chair Amy Fowler.
Okay. Hi.
And at this, hi. Sorry, I don't know how to turn my video on, but at this time, I would actually move to ratify one of the positions in that we would be moving to oppose SB 65.
Okay. Okay. I'm just taking some notes, and I'm assuming that somebody else is taking notes as well with the staff, but we have a motion to change from no position to opposition of SB 65.
Mayor Ramsey, can I just add that if anybody would like to speak to these motions, if they want to raise their hands, I will allow them to speak.
Great.
Looks like we have a few folks who have.
Okay. You can put comments in the chat or you can raise your hand. This is a tricky way to do it. Although when I saw that picture of Mayor Caldwell standing in front of all of you, I miss all of your faces, but I'm fine not having a picture of me standing up there in front of all of you. So let's see what we've got.
This is Mayor Burton. On SB 65, I'm surprised because it's given less requirements. So why would we want to oppose someone that does less requirements on a city instead of adding requirements? So I'm curious why Salt Lake City is opposing that.
Madam Chair, may I speak to that?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. There are a few things that Salt Lake City is concerned about, and I believe that my colleague, Council Member Andrew Johnston, expressed those concerns. One of which is that cities already have the ability to do exactly what this bill is intending. And I don't believe it gives us any, I don't believe it gives cities any other power than what we already have the ability to do. What I believe that it can actually do is sort of let counties and school boards off the hook. And instead of participating, they can say, nah, we're not going to participate, but we're going to go ahead and reap the benefits of it. And there are some other concerns as far as it just, for Salt Lake City, not being laid out as clearly as I think we would want it laid out so that we understand it. And we've been working with Representative Harper on this for the last year, and still some of the questions that we have haven't yet been answered. Again, my biggest concern is that we are allowing other taxing entities to not participate, and we need their participation.
Okay, so by the way, it's Senator Harper instead of Representative Harper. But you're right, it gives those taxing entities who have voting authority to make their own decision whether they want to participate or not, which I think is even better, because then they who have been elected separately from us get to vote according to what they think their constituents should have, and we don't make the decision for them. So I think there's an advantage in that area. But so I'd have a hard time opposing that one. I would be in support, but if it comes down to support or oppose, I would prefer the no recommendation as opposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fowler and Mayor Burton. I appreciate that. Anybody else have anything? And bear with me as I'm trying to look at the chat and also see if there's anybody else who wanted to. Okay, Kurt Ivey said, I would like more discussion before opposing it.
Mayor Ramsey, I wanted to just echo what Mayor Burton said. I think if Salt Lake City has some heartburn over it, you know, it's their prerogative to just not use this tool. No, this legislation doesn't force anyone to do anything. It just gives people an extra tool that could maybe work in different, you know, circumstances. All of our cities are very different. So even though it may not apply or work well in Salt Lake City, there's plenty of other cities that it could work really well in. And anytime we're giving cities more tools, I think is something that we should all be supportive of. So I also kind of echo what Mayor Burton is saying, is that I would either say to support or even in opposition, but not in oppose.
Thank you, Evelyn. And we have Gary Hill said, I believe it's too early to oppose SB 65. I'd like to study the language first. And anybody else has anything to add? The time is now. And then
Mayor Ramsey, can I just make sure everybody's clear about what no position means?
Yes.
Just before you take the vote. So no position is different than neutral. No position means we don't yet have consensus. So that's why the staff recommendation was no position, because we did not yet have consensus. It's up to you if you want to change that, of course, and we do have a motion on the table now to change it to oppose. But just so everybody's clear, you take a position, proactive position of 60% plus to support, oppose, or go neutral on a bill, and we have gone no position. So we have the substitute motion. Mayor Witt said nobody has seconded the motion of Salt Lake. And as I'm looking back on the chat, yeah, I believe that is true. The Councilmember Fowler, oh, we do have a second. Mark Christensen has seconded the motion. So sorry, I'm doing your job now, Mayor Ramsey, but I just want to make sure people are clear. The no position means we can revisit it if we get to consensus, but at this point, no position does not mean neutral.
Well, thank you, Cameron. Appreciate that clarification. Okay, please clarify the motion before we vote. My understanding, and Councilmember Fowler, if I get this wrong, I want you to correct me, but my understanding is that the motion is that we change the position on SB 65 from no position to oppose. That's the only thing we're voting on this time.
That's correct, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking one more time. I don't, and Carson wants to remind us all, as a reminder, LPC voting members will vote using the software. If you kept the page from earlier open, the vote will display momentarily. Okay. The time has come.
So let's just, yeah, so Mayor, we have somebody saying it's horrible wording, so it's to support or oppose the motion. And the motion is to change from no position to oppose. So yes, you support changing the motion or changing the staff recommendation from no position to oppose, or no, you don't, or 3, abstain, you're not ready to take a position. So you need to use the voting software Can we put the link back in for the voting software so that people have closed it, they can find it again? Perfect. So we'll leave it open for a moment to let people work through it again.
As a reminder, you need to be a LPC voting member to cast your vote on this issue because it's an official ratification or an official position.
So if you're voting yes, you're voting to oppose 65. If you're voting no, you're voting to keep our position as no position at this time. And I'll wait until Carson or somebody tells me we've hit a 60% threshold. Either way.
I don't know the exact, I won't know the exact voting, like the passage threshold until we close the poll. So if we just want to give people, it looks like the responses have slowed. So if we want to just give people one more moment to fill it out, then we'll go ahead and close the poll and we can see the results.
Great. If you're a voting member of LPC, let's give it 15 more seconds. We appreciate everyone's participation. Okay. All right, Carson, do you want to tell us how it turned out? Now, I see that it says we have 70 out of 150, but we only have 139 participants on the call, and they're not all voting members. So is that going to be taken into account when the percentage, there we go.
Sorry, the 150 is just our total percentage on the cap for the software. So that's not referring to that threshold. Okay,
great. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have 20% that voted in support of that motion and 77% that voted against it and 3% that abstained. So that motion fails. And we will now move.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Amy, I appreciate it. Representative Fowler. Now we are moving to, we have a motion, and I have to go back through the chat to see, we have a motion and a second to ratify the staff recommendations for all of these other bills. At this point, understanding we will continue to have additional discussion about everything as the session moves forward. So I'm looking to see.
Mayor Ramsey, Mayor Silvestrini made the motion. Mayor Witt seconded the motion, and this will be with SB 65 still as a no position from the league, and everything is listed on the slide that Victoria presented.
That's right. This is as it was presented. Does anybody need to see that again before you're prepared to vote? It looks like everyone's voting, so go ahead and vote. Whether you can vote yes to ratify staff recommendation or no to oppose, or you can abstain. We'll give this about 15 more seconds. And we have a question from Lynn Pace. Will the league's position on those bills be posted on the league website?
To answer that question, Lynn, that will be reflected on our bill tracker, which we'll be announcing later this week. So we'll send out a follow-up email with that information on the positions that we took and with the information on the tracker. So you'll be able to have a good sense of that.
Thanks, Carson. Okay. Let's close the voting and see how this turned out. All right, 97% said yes, 2% said no, and 2% abstained, which means that is ratified, and the recommendations from staff as of today, the ones that were presented today, we are voting to ratify. That's our position at this point, and with an understanding that there will be several things that we will continue to discuss. Who do we email if our city's roster needs to be updated? That's a really good question.
Margaret, you could either, go ahead, Victoria.
I'll drop a form into the I'll drop a form into the chat box so you can click on that and submit it, or you can email me and I'll drop my email there as well. So you can do either of those.
Great, thanks Carson, and thank you Margaret for asking that. Okay, with that we have some upcoming issues. We still have just slightly more to discuss. So Tam, I'll have you take it away.
Perfect. Go to the next slide, Carson. Hang with us for 5 more minutes, folks, just to put a couple more things on your radar as if you aren't exhausted enough and the session hasn't even started yet. First, there will be a bill on homelessness governance, and it will be based on the November 2020 Gardner Policy Institute recommendations. We've linked them there, and hopefully Carson can lift that link and put it into the chat box as well. I noticed Carson has also put the link to update the LPC delegation with the form there, and we'll send out a follow-up email to LPC. The Gardner Policy Institute recommendations came after several months of review, and there were 4 league members who served on that review board: myself, Mayor Mendenhall of Salt Lake, Mayor Caldwell of Ogden, and now former Mayor John Pike of St. George. For the record, I have communicated with Mayor Pike multiple times since he's taken a position now in Governor Cox's cabinet to remind him that once a mayor, always a mayor. Ditto with now former Mayor Reese of Cedar Hills. So they know they're going to be pestered by me forever to remember us at the city level. That being said, you can see the recommendations on the screen here, and we're waiting for the bill that will then attempt to codify these recommendations and lead to a policy discussion about those recommendations. So stay tuned. Homelessness affects every community, and every city and town pays into the mitigation fund for public safety. That was one of the major components that was raised during the summer's discussion. So stay tuned for that bill and other companion bills. Next slide. Public assets. We've talked about this one before, but we're anticipating that there will be a bill about requiring all political subdivisions to inventory their city-owned property or a political subdivision-owned property for potential public-private partnerships. So stay tuned on that one. Roger, do you want to take a moment to just quickly give people a sense of where we think things are going on fees, even though we've yet to see a bill?
Roger, you're muted.
Roger, you're muted. Dun, 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 dun.
I'm being good for the first time, muted myself. The auditor's discussion with the university system about their fees has sort of led to a desire to examine all fees. Of course, we have the transportation utility fee issue there. Representative Brammer has at least thought about going forward with a bill that deals with the discussion of what should be the standards for fees. I think our view to him is probably a legitimate discussion if everybody, all governmental entities are involved in it. The standards shouldn't be singled out to cities. At this juncture, I know he wants to go forward with this bill, but I think it's a bigger bite than he realizes in that regard. I haven't seen a proposal for a ban on the transportation utility fees. I will say we've discussed the issue with various legislators. I think it would be very difficult to pass an authorization for them, but I think that we could also probably maintain the status quo. But I would say if it doesn't happen this session, what our position will be to try to hold that off. There's going to be a re-examination of what are the standards that governments use for arriving at their fees and the amounts of those fees.
Perfect. Thanks, Raj. Victoria, do you want to hit the UBCC?
Sure. We've heard some rumors that there may be legislation to change membership on the Uniform Building Commission. Right now, the League and UAC have a member that they select, and our member right now is an elected councilman. And we're concerned, our understanding is that the building committee feels like that the commission makeup is too lopsided to local government. And so they want to change the makeup of that commission. We have concern with removing the one elected official because we think they provide a good perspective on that body. And so we're talking with kind of the proponents of those changes. And I think we may be able to come to an agreement to keep that position, but we're still discussing and working on that. Carson, if you go to the next slide. So we've put this slide up before, but just want to remind you, we cannot emphasize enough, even though you're sick of it at this point, we need you to reach out to your legislators. And if you don't know who that is, then you can go to the legislative website, click on legislators, and then find them by address and either by your city or if you reside within your city to help find those legislators if you don't know them. And then reach out to them. We're really going to need your help contacting them. It's our understanding that we will not even be allowed on the third floor of the Capitol, which is where we usually go to talk to other lobbyists, find out what's going on in the rumor mill, but also to ask legislators to step off the Senate or House floor to talk to us. Most, if not all of this will be digital. And if you have talked to your legislator before session starts, they're more likely to answer your questions and answer your phone calls. So please do that. And as Speaker Wilson said today, it's really going to be important this year for everyone to do that. We are right now getting a new build tracking system up, and so we hope to have that up in the next few days. And we're in the final edits for a policy guide, which we think will give you good talking points on a lot of these issues, particularly housing and public safety for this year. And as a final reminder, please make sure your LPC numbers are up to date. As you can see, we're really grateful for your patience of working through the voting today as we work out the kinks on virtual LPC, but make sure your rosters are up to date and so that you're ready to go for our next meeting. Carson, if you'd go to the next slide. Oh, Wayne, I wanted to give you just a second to add any comments on the governor's budget, and then I think we're wrapping up. So Wayne, if you want to make any other additions on the hot off the press governor budget.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. So just really quickly, I'll throw the link again. This is, of course, just a recommendation to the legislature. They can choose to go with portions of it or none of it. It's up to them. But as we discussed, there's $350 million for double trucking front runner. He has about 125 million in there for open space and recreation, 125 million for rural infrastructure, 2.5 million to increase for indigent defense program. He gives $1 million to UDOT to assist local communities in planning. So there's a lot of positive things in there. They do make a comment on page 60 about our obligation to plan for the future and to zone correctly and provide housing and infrastructure for our new residents. So take a look at that. I think it's telling that they feel like there's an obligation there for cities and towns to make some changes. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Wayne. You can see on the screen here the plan dates for the session LPCs. They will be virtual. We will be at noon, and we will continue to work on this format to make sure we get all of your input. And as Cam has put in the chat, some of this is still in flux. The legislature is changing their plans for accessibility and scheduling all the time. And so we will do our best to keep you informed if we have to change our scheduling and what else is happening on the Hill. Thanks, everyone, and I'll turn it back to Mayor Ramsey.
Thank you, Victoria, and all of you. Appreciate it so much.
Mayor Ramsey, can I add one last thing?
Yes, Cameron, go ahead.
Our policy guide will be out this week for legislators, so that'll be a tool for you to share with legislators over the next few days and weeks. Likewise, our new website will include a brand new bill tracker, and it's taken much longer than anticipated to get it built, but it will be live. So Lynn, to your question about when bill positions will be posted, they'll be on that new bill tracking software that will be available to you in the next few days. And then make sure you update your LPC members prior to our next scheduled LPC meeting on January 25th. We will not meet the first week of the session because there's no local officials day. We're sorry we had to cancel it, but there was no other option. I love youth council time, and so I'm sorry that we aren't able to bring the youth councils up. We have made a request for the governor or the lieutenant governor to do a Zoom call with youth councils. They have accepted at a high level, but have not been able to confirm a date yet with us. So we'll keep trying to do that. But yeah, stay tuned as everything changes. Make sure you're signed up for Friday Facts and the daily email so that you can stay appraised of all of the moving pieces as they move fast and furious through the session. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you, to all of the staff working so hard, and to all of you who are participating. We really appreciate your input. We appreciate your efforts as part of the League Army. Please reach out to your legislators and solidify that relationship. Have an open door communication. If any of you have a problem and really can't communicate with your legislator, let us know. Let staff know, or let one of the officers know, and we'll do what we can to try to help facilitate that. But we just appreciate all of your efforts. And Cam, started out by saying buckle up, and I think that's the truth. We're in for quite a ride, but it's what we all signed up for, and for some reason we all like it, right? This is what we're here to do. So thank you. And with that, I am prepared to accept a motion to adjourn in the chat. Okay, we have a motion and a second, several of them. Okay, all in favor. You don't even have to type aye. We are just going to adjourn. We have to be a little unique. We're all thinking outside the box here. So we are adjourned for this meeting. Thank you so much again for participating, and we will look forward to meeting with all of you. I hope someday I get to see your faces this year. Anyway, thank you for your efforts, my friends.